Hello and welcome to this very special interview edition from Irish Wrestling Entertainment and BodyslamNet. I'm joined today by the one and the only Bobby Fish. Bobby, thank you very much for your time. How are you doing today, sir?
Yes, sir. I'm doing really well. Just happy to be on here with you, sir. Ireland, I've been twice,
Hmm.
and hands down, two of my favorite trips.
Well, absolutely. Listen, anytime you want to come back, you're more than welcome. There's many promotions over here at the moment. OTT is firing all cylinders, so you'd be more than welcome back over anytime. Try to put a good in with.
You listen, you know them. Please pass on my information. I'm happy to. I would jump at the opportunity.
Absolutely, no, 100% would do. Listen, for a lot of our Irish audiences, I'm a long time fan of yours, particularly going back all the way to your Ring of Honor days, your New Japan days with Red Dragon. For a lot of our fans over in the who would have been more familiar with the work from NXT and
Hmm.
AEW of late. You're now a member of the MLW roster. What's it been like being part of the MLW roster? Probably with a roster that's quite green, fresh. A lot of people entering the business, but a lot of people in different parts of their journey as well. What's being part of MLW been like for you so far?
It's been really interesting and it's been really cool. I mean, it's a breath of fresh air to be around a young locker room and to see that. I think for years we get on in this industry and we're around our peers, and within our peers, everybody kind of knows the same stuff, but you get around some younger individuals still on the come up, and you start to realize, like, wow, there's stuff that either gets left out or that it's just not the common knowledge that you're used to, and you realize that some of this is useful for them. And when you have those moments where you can see the light bulb go off for people based on an analogy that you've used a million times, or just some piece of advice, it's I didn't anticipate that being as cool as it is, and I really, man, I love it.
Yeah, MLW is probably an unheralded promotion in this part of the world. But for those of us who kind of are in the wrestling bubble, it's always been kind of a niche area,
Mm.
rapidly evolving slowly over time. The roster can get to a point where there's so many really hot talents, but then more often than not might move on to bigger promotions. At the moment, like you're facing the likes of Alex Kane, who did a few weeks ago at Intimidation Games. This weekend, you're facing Akira. You've got Battle Riot coming up soon. What can Irish fans who may be able to subscribe through Triller or elsewhere, what can they expect from shows like that?
I it's it's a little bit outside of what they are used to seeing,
Mm.
but in the best way possible.
Mhm.
And you've got hungry talent trying to make their mark. You have um, been there, done that talent like myself. But I still got gas left in the tank, so like I'm not ready to just sit on the sidelines, but I love coaching, and I feel like a young locker room like that is a perfect place. I look back to like Fit Finley,
Mm.
and pretty appropriate. Um, but Fit had a late run,
Yeah.
um, and that late run, he just worked with so much younger talent, and to be able to teach on the job like that, it must have been so rewarding for him. Now that I've had this little glimpse into like some seminars and whatnot, um, I'm not saying that that's what I'm trying to do, but if that were to be kind of my place for a little while now, I that's a pretty sweet ending to a satisfying career to begin with.
You've had a yeah. I was quite taken aback when I was researching your career in terms. You've actually been in the sport for about 22 years now, since 2002, if I'm not mistaken, from when your original debut was. But on top of that, a lot of fans wouldn't know. They may have been exposed to your MMA background, be it through your amateur kickboxing record, your recent venture into, I suppose, the kind of influencer boxing over in Dubai in 2022, your MMA background. You've talked repeatedly on your podcast beforehand, talking about your own exposure to that kind of world. How big of an influence has martial arts and whatnot been into your wrestling career as well?
Huge. I mean, just massive. I would say that the first guy that kind of clued me into that being a possibility was Kenta, and
Yeah.
it was when I was working with Noah. And then I'd say the biggest influence on my come up from there
Mm.
was Samoa Joe.
Mm.
He was on his epic run in Ring of Honor, kind of the same time that everything Kenta was doing in Japan was just,
Mhm.
he had like Midas touch. And I started to realize, like, wow, that's because that's my flavor of ice cream, right?
Mm.
I've been martial arts since I was 8. So I always envisioned infusing my pro wrestling with that. I think there's a process to pro wrestling. And looking back now, I realize like you got to get the fundamentals and everything sorted out. Then you can start to introduce what makes you you. And
Mm.
that's a guy like Kenta and a guy like Joe were so massively capable of doing. And it was, they were painting with a brush that nobody else was painting with. And it was just goddamn cool. And so I would say those are the two that really made me see the possibility in like, oh no, you can lean all the way
Mm.
in. You can go all the way there to the point where now I feel like my wife, if she watches my wrestling, she's like, all you do is punch and kick.
Well, listen,
But
I've a taekwondo and kickboxing background. I did that from the age of 8 to 16. So
mm,
when I watch your work, and particularly when you're part of Red Dragon with Kyle, that mixture of combinations with strikes, that's something that really appeals to me because it's different, it's unique, and the way you're able to incorporate combinations. Um,
yeah.
it's not every wrestling fan will appreciate that necessarily because a lot of people like things being done because that's the way they're done. And that's kind of the
Yeah.
same with any industry. Did you get any blowback across your career for trying to incorporate new styles? Because at different stages of the last 15 years, MMA has almost been a taboo subject within wrestling. People try
Mm.
to lean in too much or lean in or move too far away from it and don't want to be associated at all. Did you get any blowback, perhaps in WWE when you try to incorporate that style?
Not too much. I think at that point, like our NXT run, I think Kyle and I had gotten to a point. Red Dragon was really where I think Kyle and I were able to round out our skill set and figure out like, oh shit, this is who we are.
Yeah.
So not to say we were a finished product by any means, but going into NXT, as far as like what we did in ring, we kind of had that developed.
Yeah.
So because we did it well, I don't think we got blowback. I think when you really get blowback is when it's not good.
Yeah.
And that's when you introduce it too soon. And I was guilty of that. If you go back and watch my early stuff with Noah, I'm throwing kicks, but they're not good, And it's not that I didn't know how to throw them. I've been doing like yourself. I started Taekwondo at 8.
Yeah.
So the dexterity I have, I'm, the most educated feet in professional wrestling. So that wasn't the issue. The issue was I didn't have enough. I'm going to try to, not use baseball here and tread delicately. I didn't have enough pro wrestling experience to make the martial arts work for me. They were almost working against me at that point.
Yeah. No, I completely understand that, and it's about, I suppose, mastering a craft and then putting your own flavor on top of it, as people, I suppose, call it. You mentioned your kind of partnership with Kyle there, and particularly with your time in Red Dragon. I loved, in particular, your time in Ring of Honor. Together as a team, and then moving over to New Japan as part of the junior heavyweight division. You had some incredible matches, particularly against, say, the American Wolves or the Briscoe brothers. Do you have any specific memories, particularly with the Briscoe brothers? I saw you had a lovely piece recently chatting about Jay Briscoe, talking about being one of the toughest men in wrestling. So would you have any specific memories working with them?
I mean, they were an absolute like gem, a one of one in pro wrestling, such genuine human beings that like they almost couldn't be sideways. Like they're so genuine. Mark and the late Jay Jamin, their reputations preceded them, obviously, but they were so, and I mean this in the best way possible, they were so unaware of their reputations. Like they were unaware that they were, you're them boys. you know. So that made it like just super charming to be around, and knowing that they had the cachet that they had, and then they were who Kyle and I defeated for our first Ring of Honor title. Like, if we weren't already playing with a good hand, which Hunter Johnson is responsible for giving us that run with the American Wolves. I mean, you don't get more babyface than they were at that time. So to establish us as heels, like, we just went out there and we're ourselves. It was really easy. And then the cherry on top was to win the Ring of Honor tag titles, but to win them from the Briscoes. Yeah, I mean, you truly could not ask for a better hand to play poker with.
Yeah, no, like, tag team wrestling's always been my personal favorite type of wrestling. That kind of, when you touched on your blend working with the American Werewolves, I love the fact that you kind of just went out there and beat the piss out of them to a degree, and that kind of putting that out there, that energy, I love that kind of authenticity. You touched on the humility and genuine nature of the Briscoes that kind of exuded off the screen at the time as well. When you in 2017 or so, you kind of moved on to NXT though. You debuted shortly before NXT Brooklyn 3, if I'm not mistaken, but you really kind of exploded that NXT Brooklyn 3 event just when you jumped Sanity earlier in the show in company of Kyle, then later on in the evening when you distracted Drew McIntyre, Drew Galloway, and then Adam Cole jumped in from behind. What are your key memories from that night? Because it felt like that was a night where NXT truly arrived into becoming bigger than it was previously. The NXT Brooklyn 1 and 2 have been good, but this brought it to a whole new level, in my opinion.
I feel like looking back, NXT at that time, like when Fergal had come in and Kevin and Rami, and that, it was like you didn't know who was going to pop up, and it made that place like the place to be. I would say a couple of years prior to that, New Japan might have held that title. NXT Black and Gold was becoming that. I don't even know if they were Black and Gold at the time, but like, I always go back to like Fergal. It was once he jumped, it was like, oh my God, and anything is possible. So when we were coming in for that Brooklyn one, our trepidation was, is anybody going to know who the fuck we are? Like, that was, and that's just your own insecurities, just wreaking havoc on your imagination, I suppose. But yeah, that was our concern. I appreciate you saying that you felt like that's when it arrived, because I remember having a conversation with Adam and with Kyle. Kyle and I, when we were waiting to go out and do our first appearance, I remember, being crouched down wherever we were and looking at each other like, here we go. And, truly not knowing, like, is it going to go over like a fart in church? Like, we don't know. And then the thing with Adam, it had already gone well. So we were, kind of feeling better about it, but not totally sure. When Adam did Bebe at the top of the, and the entire Barclay Center was with him, with us on that, it was like, oh, wow. Like they do know who we are. And that was that was kind of an arrival for the three of us, I think.
It was almost an arrival for fans to a degree as well, because a lot of us prior to that would have been, say, New Japan fans, Ring of Honor fans, wouldn't necessarily have been huge WWE fans. They'd have tuned in for, say, Fergal's matches, Kevin's matches, whatever, in those takeover shows. But at that point, it felt like NXT was just the shiny, exciting thing before that. But then once you guys kind of arrived, it became its own entity in itself. And you kind of saw that over the following year or two, where then you guys are competing in Survivor Series, part like you were competing with the New Day and the War Raiders, part of that match. I always felt that the Undisputed Era gave NXT an identity and something to ground itself in. And when you became a staple of the show over the next 3 years in particular, where year on year, the War Games matches seem to feature you guys. What are your? I know you got injured in one of them, but like, what are your key takeaways from, or your key memories being such a huge part of a historic match being reintroduced to the kind of fan zeitgeist, as it were?
I somewhat hesitate to say this because I've said it before,
Mm.
but the War Games, I was such a huge fan of that time in wrestling, the Crockett years, the NWA, and I know Hunter and Sean were fans of that time frame as well. I wore out those VHS tapes, the War Games, over and over and over. So it's truly humbling to think that we were fashioned as a group. It was Hunter that put us together. Um, Triple H is the one that, and I have to assume, and I don't know for certain, but I have to assume he had this planned because they do long-term storytelling there. That's what they are better at than anybody.
Mm.
So I assume that he had a plan for it, and to be introduced into the War Games the way that we were, and we became synonymous with it. I used to joke around and call us Hunter's Horsemen,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
it kind of felt like that's who we got the opportunity to be. I'd say one of my favorite matches was Philadelphia. It was a takeover where we wrestled AOP, Kyle and I,
Yeah.
and seeing Ellering on the floor, it really just felt like, oh, okay, we're Tully and Arn somehow,
Yeah.
and that's Hawk and Animal, and it was just like, so like the 13-year-old in me was just tickled to death that was yeah. So I will forever be grateful to Hunter,
Mm.
for putting that together, and having those wonderful memories in my career.
No.
And I'm thankful well to Hunter Johnson. Hunters have played a huge part in my career, for having the foresight to see Kyle and I together as a unit, because that's where I think Kyle would say too, we became who we, a version of what we are from here forward.
Yeah, 100%. And then I'd say that analogy of being the four horsemen of NXT, that's a perfect analogy, and kind of goes back to what I was saying about being the real focal point and grounding anchor for NXT as a brand, and everything was built out off the back of that. It felt like at the time. You did have some misfortune when you're in NXT as well, in terms of
Yeah.
you guys would be riding the crest of a wave, and then unfortunately you tore your ACL and MCL at one point. Then later on you tore your triceps. How difficult was that, like personally? I suppose you've always got a high level sporting background from mixed martial arts that we touched on earlier. How difficult was that, seeing that you guys are going 100 miles an hour, you're going straight to the moon, you're carrying everything, but you personally have to take a step back while everybody else is still going forward? How tough was that for you mentally and personally at the time?
It was pretty difficult because that was the first, my ACL was the first real surgery I had. Even in my athletic career, I had managed to not have like a major surgery like that. So that was difficult. They plugged Roddy in, so it was a little bit bittersweet to see them continuing on. But then I was happy for my friends, and trying not to be, that selfish prick that we can all be, I suppose. But to see the success that they had, and the way that Kyle and Roddy and Adam blended, I just was chomping at the bit to get back, and then to see, what that dynamic would become, because Roddy was truly the only person that could have been plugged into that spot within the company, and us to continue the way that we did. And then the dynamic was different when it was the three of them, just as it was when it was Adam, Kyle, and I. But then it became an even different dynamic with all four of us.
Yeah,
So,
better, yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of seemed to get cooler. And at the end of the day, we were four guys that came up in the industry together, and were pretty thick as thieves, to begin with. So we would have been hanging out with each other anyway. So, I think Hunter might have seen that and said, all right, well, let's slap a name on it and see if we can make some money.
It was absolutely awesome as a fan, particularly at the time. I suppose you left NXT when it was in a strange point. It was struggling with its identity to a degree, where there's many different interests in trying to determine what they want it to be. Do they want it to be its own standalone entity? Do they want it to be a developmental? and you got released at that time. What was that like internally? I suppose as an NXT talent at the time, we've got differing views and differing interests, and you're not
Mm.
sure what your career path is, not just for yourself, but people around you as well. How because it became across on screen. It was quite a strange environment when it pivoting to that NXT 2.0 off the back of COVID, which even during COVID was an extremely exciting time and the product that was being produced. So, what was that like for
Yeah.
you? Obviously terrible. Anybody getting released in any sort of line of work, but like, what was it like for you at the time?
It was really caused a lot of anxiety because you just didn't know. And previous to that, we always knew. You know, we had conversations. We always kind of knew our direction. And more than anything, the office was very good about letting us know what our identity was, and that was individually
Mm.
with and a group as a whole. So I never went to work, wondering like, well, what should I be given today? But then at that time, it was all question marks. Are we staying together? How does Adam and Kyle, being against each other now, how does that change, and how does that affect Roddy and I? And then, are Roddy and I going to feud? Are we going to be it just was very up in the air. And I think any performer would tell you that's a weird place to operate from.
Yeah, clarity is everything in any kind of high performing environment. The product itself just felt clunky, but like following after that, you landed briefly in MLW before coming into AEW. I thoroughly enjoyed, really, really enjoyed that initial burst out of AEW, where it was just you as a singles competitor, where it didn't have anybody else. It was all focused on you as such. Your matches where you were fight with Jungle Boy, Lee Moriarty, Danielson, even up to your Punk match. I really enjoyed that. I think a lot of people did as well. What was that like? I suppose at that stage of your career, and obviously you've been a Ring of Honor TV champion previously. You've obviously wrestled a single, but for so long in your career, you'd been known as, I suppose, that somebody's part of a unit, a tag team, or whatnot.
Yeah.
What was it like to kind of spread your wings on your own and showing your own worth and your own value and your own skill set?
It was rewarding in its own way. I wasn't sure of where it was headed, and that's what I was desperate to establish, was where do we go with it, because we can go a bunch of different ways. And it felt like, okay, kind of that nasty route. And I always envisioned it as like, okay, well, I could really give a shit about wins and losses. Like, I'm kind of a hired, gun for hire was the way that I saw, based on the little bit direction that I had. So that's what I was trying to give. And then I tried to establish, like, is that what you want? Because if that's what you want, I think it could be really cool, especially if I'm going to go back and work indies and stuff. And like, who knows, I could pop up anywhere. So that was kind of the way that I saw it. And it was, for a short period of time there, it was pretty rewarding. The match with Danielson, I really, man, that thing was like a decade in the making to come back to, because we had wrestled at a independent promotion, Evolve, at one point. And we had never revisited it. And the whole time we were in WWE, at the same time, we were not on the same show. So to get that, and Brian will always just be, Brian. I mean, he's a, this generation's, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So I thought that, man, there was some space for me to spread my wings even more. We just didn't entirely get there. And then I think some of it too was like other people coming back into the fold, whether it be Adam. Eventually, after I had left, Roddy would get there, but Kyle coming back in, there was a natural like gravitation to that, of course. But yeah, it was just a little bit clunky, I guess.
Yeah. Clunky's a good word for it. And it felt like, I know you've mentioned this previously, but it did feel like there was money left on the table, both in your career, but it felt like a natural point where everything's going to build to an Undisputed Era Elite face-off, and given your background within the War Games matches, it felt as a fan who's been following your journey through NXT and following the way AEW developed with the Blood and Guts match, I thought for all the love and money in the world is going to have Undisputed you guys against the Elite on this corner. I think everybody in the world knew Roderick Strong was going to eventually come to AEW.
Yeah.
That could have been monstrous. Was there any discussions at that time as to that something like that happening? Or I know there's a lot of variables in there, injuries and people kind of dependencies and whatnot, but was there any of those discussions at the time about building something of that effect?
Yeah, I think it was always on the horizon.
Mm.
Just that horizon line, at times appeared closer and at times appeared further away. And I think if we were all to be there at the same time, that's when the trigger would have been pulled.
Mm.
But it just, for whatever, for numerous reasons, it just didn't pan out that way. And it's really unfortunate because I do feel like there was money left on the table. But it's pro wrestling, so never say never, and who knows,
Yeah, 100%. As a fan, like I follow the product, all wrestling products religiously. I still think there is a huge amount of space for you, particularly within this new Undisputed Kingdom division and whatnot. And there's so many different opportunities to evolve off the back of that, particularly with Roddy, Adam, and Kyle all kind of being in and involved that space. So I do hope you'll see in that space down the road. Shortly after that, you landed in Impact Wrestling. It's some brilliant encounters like Josh Alexander. But I suppose a lot of fans would remember your run with Impact in particular for blowing up as almost an internet meme with a "Where's the lie?"
Yeah.
What was that? What was that like? You've asked a very valid question, and then the next thing you know, you've blown up online.
It was one of the strangest things to happen in my career. I remember going in. We had this kind of promo segment, and it felt like it was running long, but everybody had a piece of the pie and was supposed to, do a part of it. So you're in the midst of it and you're just doing your part of it. And that's what that was. Little did I know what it would turn out to be. And then it just kind of took on it became the monster of its own. And it was memes and all sorts of stuff.
There's worse things in this world to be associated with than an epic promo that has a line that kind of goes viral like that. So I find it hilarious. But
I made a T-shirt of it on my BobbyFishApparel.com because I was like, it's actually one of the shirts that I take to shows at this point. Because it went viral.
That's the game. Like people remember that forever. I mean, I suppose like just looking to the future now. I have touched on previously. You've obviously your affiliation with your previous Undisputed Era, Undisputed Elite teammates. Has there been any talks with AEW since leaving? I suppose obviously we know there was an evaluation disparity in terms of what you're looking for, what AEW were expecting. Has there been any talks over the last kind of year and a bit since you left?
No, not really. I haven't. I had an agent that I worked with previously, like when that negotiation was going on. And he's a friend of mine. So I would assume that they would reach out to him if there was anything. And there really hasn't been. So I'm just, biding my time, doing my thing, seeing what still interests me in this industry. Because like I said, I feel pretty satisfied with my career in front of the camera. Now, at this point, I figured like, okay, well, physically, my body would be telling me like I got to stop. We talked about DDPY, and I will give DDPY a lot of the credit for the fact that like I feel like I could do this another decade if I wanted to. Do I want to do that? It depends on the day you ask me. I think that I overall, I do feel pretty satisfied with my career. So if in-ring were to be coming to an end, I'd be okay with that. But at the moment, that's still on the table. So yeah, I mean, I look forward to every encounter at this point.
Yeah, no, we did touch on DDPY before we jumped to the phone call. I was going to move on to next. How much do you put down your, I suppose, your feeling of well-being, how good you're feeling, how much you're able to still go out there and put on amazing matches, be with MLW and elsewhere, down to DDPY? Because I touched on off camera, I'm a recent convert. I'm somebody
Yeah.
who's come from a sporting background, and it's been brilliant for me. I've tried yoga and everything else under the sun. Hasn't necessarily helped with those kind of disc issues I've had. What's it been like, I suppose, for your own well-being, but also being a teacher, and you're giving seminars this weekend, too, I believe, this weekend in Chicago. So what's it like, I suppose, the fulfillment side of that as well?
It's one of those things that because it's so generalized and
Mm.
it can reach so many people, it's really rewarding to get the feedback there because you don't have to necessarily be an athlete now. Like if you are, or you're in pro wrestling or martial arts, I mean, I've done some classes at martial arts schools,
Mm.
and one of them that I did, it was after sparring, and I think that it because it combines coordination, it combines balance, it combines a little bit of PT. It's got all of these things. It's not just mobility. Um, I think it's fit for the masses, like truly fit for the masses. It's the only thing that is in my routine that one I do and can do every day if I
Mm-hmm.
want to.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a couple times a day. But also it's the one thing that my body sometimes will wake up. I'll wake up a morning and my body's craving it. Like there's certain positions, ignition into bent legged bar back into forward fold. It's my favorite. And there's mornings I wake up that my low back is it's begging me, and my neck.
Mm.
Because you're hanging, so you get a little bit of traction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's like oil for the spine. It's crazy.
It's absolutely amazing. Anybody watching this, I would invite to give the free trial on DDPY app a go. It's been huge for me, personal my injury issues as well. Before I let you go, I'd want to remind our fans that MLW Bobby will be appearing this coming weekend against Akira in Chicago. Will be appearing at Battle Riot in June this next couple of weeks. Is there anything else in the horizon for you, Bobby, that fans can keep on the eye out for?
Um, yeah, I don't know where I'm going to pop up doing DDP yoga. I mean, I've been popping up a lot of places unexpectedly, but I'm enjoying that. You never know where that will take me. And then yeah, I mean, I got independent wrestling bookings, all over the US, but I've been doing some international stuff too, and God willing, I'll be in Ireland sooner than later.
That'd be amazing. And anybody listen to this as well, I'd be remiss if I don't mention, please go back and listen to episodes of the Undisputed podcast. It was something in 2022 that I thoroughly enjoyed, particularly the mixture of wrestling guests, MMA guests. It was really, really good. And you also had your own take on wrestling. So anybody's got a bit of time or working with headphones on, please do check out the Undisputed podcast as well. Bobby, listen, you've been hugely generous for your time this evening. I really do appreciate it.
No, man, it was a pleasure. It was great chatting with you, and I appreciate you, sir. I mean, it's the charmed life that I've been allowed to live, mostly as a result of pro wrestling. It doesn't exist without people being interested. So the fact that you give a shit is the coolest thing in the world to me. So thank you, sir.
Oh, listen, thank you for everything you've done for us. So listen, all Irish Wrestling fans, this will be up on bodyslam.net and Irish Wrestling Entertainment in the coming days. So thank you very much again. Take care.